In a quiet town of Blackwood, nestled beneath a canopy of ancient oak trees, there stood a grand, old Victorian house that had witnessed generations come and go. At its heart were the Ellister siblings, Emily, the eldest at 14, and her two younger brothers, Jacob, aged 12, and Lucas, a mere 8 years old. Their parents had left them for the weekend, entrusting the house and their well-being to Emily. It was a dark and stormy night when their parents departed, and the children were left to their own devices. The rain drummed against the windows, and the wind howled like a banshee. Emily, being the responsible big sister, had a list of rules for her brothers. Rule number 1, Emily declared, her voice trembling with tension, no going into the basement. It's too eerie, and you know how Lucas gets terrified down there. Jacob nodded in agreement, and Lucas clutched his stuffed bear, Teddy, tightly, his young eyes filled with fear. Rule number 2, she continued in a whisper, lock all the doors and windows. We don't want any uninvited guests. The children followed her orders meticulously, locking all the doors and windows, creating a false sense of security as the world outside grew increasingly hostile. Emily knew they'd be home alone for 2 nights, and she was determined to keep them safe. Rule number 3, Emily said sternly, her voice filled with foreboding, no answering the phone unless it's mom or dad calling. Ignore any other calls, no matter how sinister they may sound. Little did they know that this rule would be tested in ways they could never have imagined. As the night settled in, the storm grew more intense, the rain lashing the windows like 1,000 ghostly fingers, and the children huddled together in the dimly lit living room. Emily had made popcorn, but the cheerful act felt out of place amidst the encroaching darkness. Thunder rumbled outside, and the house creaked as if it had a malevolent life of its own. Just as Emily was beginning to relax, the phone rang. It was an old rotary phone, a relic from the past, and it rang with an eerie, echoing sound that sent shivers down her spine. Emily glanced at it with a frown, her pulse quickening. Her parents weren't supposed to call so soon. She picked up the receiver cautiously. "Hello," she said, her voice quivering. Static crackled on the other. And a low, raspy voice whispered, "I see you." Fear clawed at her, and she slammed the phone down, her heart pounding like a relentless drum. "What was it?" Jacob asked, his eyes wide with fear. "Wrong number," Emily replied, her voice barely more than a terrified whisper. But it wasn't the end of it. The phone continued to ring throughout the night, each time with a different sinister message. "I know you're alone," one voice hissed. "I'm coming for you," threatened another. Despite her fear, Emily clung to the rules, refusing to answer the calls, no matter how relentless they became. She gathered her brothers close, attempting to reassure them that it was just a cruel prank. But it wasn't just the calls that terrified them. Strange things began happening in the house. Whispers echoed in the darkened hallways when no one was there, and shadows danced in the corners of the rooms, their movements unnatural and chilling. Doors opened and closed on their own, and the children felt a malevolent presence lurking in the darkness, watching and waiting. On the second night, as the storm continued its relentless assault, the children huddled together in the living room, too terrified to sleep. The incessant ringing of the phone had now transformed into maniacal laughter, echoing through the house, a sound that seemed to emanate from the very walls. A loud crash came from the basement, sending Lucas into a fit of tears. Emily knew she had to confront whatever lurked down there. She took a flashlight, and with Jacob in tow, ventured into the suffocating darkness. In the basement, they found the source of the noise. It was an old, dusty mirror that had fallen from the wall, its glass shattered into 1,000 malicious shards. As Emily picked it up, her reflection seemed distorted, mocking her. With a grotesque grin, "Let's get out of here," Jacob urged, his voice quivering with dread. Emily agreed, and they both rushed back to the living room where Lucas was waiting, his eyes filled with terror. They continued watching their movie, trying to forget the horrors lurking within their home. But the oppressive atmosphere persisted. As the night wore on, an unsettling quiet settled over the house, broken only by the chilling laughter emanating from the phone. Emily knew they were not alone, and the feeling of dread intensified. The clock ticked slowly, and the shadows deepened. Then, a deafening crash shattered the stillness, originating from the kitchen. Lucas burst into tears, and Emily knew they had to investigate. She led the way, heart pounding, down the dimly lit hallway to the kitchen. There, they found the yard door hanging wide open, its frame splintered and destroyed. The yard beyond was shrouded in inky darkness. Emily's fear surged as she realized this was no ordinary storm. There was something malevolent at work. Terrified, she screamed and ran back to her siblings. They huddled together in her room, their minds filled with unending horror, their safety stripped away. Emily took her phone, trying to call her parents, seeking any escape from the nightmarish ordeal they found themselves in. But as she dialed, a shadowy figure materialized, a demonic presence. It moved with unnatural speed, reaching her before she could complete the call. The demon grabbed her, its touch icy and malevolent, and flung her violently to the floor. Her phone slipped from her grasp, its screen shattering as it hit the ground. She cried out in pain, unable to reach her siblings, who were now terrified witnesses to her ordeal. As she lay there, her vision blurred with pain and fear, the demon presented her with a gruesome sight. The severed heads of her brothers, Jacob and Lucas, lay before her, bloodied and lifeless. She screamed in utter despair, unable to comprehend the horrific tableau before her. Emily's consciousness waned, her mind unable to process the relentless horrors that had befallen her. After what felt like an eternity, she awoke, still lying in her room, drenched in sweat, her heart racing. Her brothers, whole and unharmed, were by her side, their eyes filled with concern. The horror had been a nightmare, a relentless, terrifying dream that had felt all too real. She clung to her brothers, grateful that they were safe, and she knew that the horrors of that night would forever haunt her.